When you think of February, what's the first thing that comes to mind? Super Bowl? Valentine's Day? Pokemon's 20th anniversary? Well, those are all fine, and certainly legitimate reasons to look forward to February, but it seems we've forgotten that this is the month to look back on the achievements of a certain minority. Of course, I'm talking about Black History Month. We've come a long way as far as racism and equal rights goes, but as 2015 showed us, we still have a long way to go. So, in honor of Black History Month, I'm going to be counting down my top 5 favorite Black History Month and anti-racism episodes of American cartoons. Before we get started though, I wanted to make a quick honorable mention. As much as I wanted to keep this list solely about cartoons, I feel like it would be a shame not to mention one of my favorite Black History Month episodes from one of my favorite childhood shows starring one of my favorite childhood actors. I'm of course referring to the episode True Colors from That's So Raven. This was a great episode because we get to see how even though we may not see racism as much as we used to, it still exists and can really hurt people. I also enjoyed Corey's story of having to realize the importance of Black History Month, which was something he really wasn't interested in at the start of the episode. As someone who never really got into history until I was already out of high school, I can definitely relate to this. If you want to see a great non-animated Black History Month episode, I highly recommend it. Anyway, now on to the rest of this list. Number 5, Over a Barrel from My Little Pony Friendship is Magic. Wait, how can there be racism in a world of candy-colored talking ponies? Honestly, you'd be surprised how many episodes have underlying messages about racism. In fact, this episode is widely accepted by the brony community as the racism episode of MLP. The story is a slight parody/retelling of the settlers versus Native Americans. The ponies represent the English settlers, while the buffalo represent the Native Americans, with neither side willing to give up the land, and all-out war breaks out between the ponies and buffalo. They of course had a much happier ending than their historical counterparts. The thing I like about this episode is that it teaches us about racism without the need of showing or saying anything against people of color. Let's face it, people get offended over everything. I'm sure some people are going to be surprised that this is at the bottom of the list, especially seeing as how I'm a big fan of this series. But with how vague the racism lesson really is, not to mention how much better the other episodes on this list do the job, I couldn't really justify putting this any higher than the others. Number 4, The Evil Manta from the Little Mermaid TV series. When I first noticed the racism elements of Over a Barrel, I instantly remembered this episode of one of my favorite childhood shows. In fact, I still go back and watch it to this day. Once again, we have a lesson about racism told in a very unique way that avoids coming out as being racist. This was the first episode where we got to meet the Evil Manta, and while his plan was pretty juvenile at best, it doesn't fail to stir up plenty of trouble for Ariel. The Evil Manta goes around convincing all the sea creatures that they should only be friends with fish of their same species. He does this by playing to their vanity and points out how they are different from everyone else. This leads to all the sea creatures becoming racist against each other, and it takes a lot of convincing, plus an awesome song, to get everyone to get along again and work together to defeat the Evil Manta. I really enjoy this episode because while it's still teaching us not to be racist without doing anything really offensive, they're also a bit more open and honest about their intent. While no one actually comes out and says that someone is racist, the Evil Manta does say the next closest word: prejudice. This helps cement the episode as the racism episode, since racism is a form of prejudice. In Harmony was also the first song I learned from the TV series, so that doesn't hurt it either. Number 3, Truck from Teen Titans. Once again, we have an episode that teaches us not to be racist without actually coming out as racist. We meet Val Yor, an alien whose prejudice against Tamarins makes him anything but nice towards Starfire. Starfire's used to this and doesn't want to disrupt the mission they're on, so she keeps quiet about it and doesn't say anything to her friends. When Robin and Cyborg find out about it, they confront Val Yor, but once again Starfire interferes, stating she doesn't want the mission to be compromised just to protect her feelings. In the end, Starfire saves Val Yor, and in most stories this would lead to Val Yor finally getting rid of his prejudice and learning the error of his ways. But it doesn't. Val Yor still holds on to his prejudice, and now has a lower opinion on the rest of the Titans for wanting to be friends with Star. I mean, sure, yeah, he does have that comment about, hey, yeah, you're pretty good for a Tamaran, you must be good of the good ones. but it's so backhanded that it really just goes along with that old saying, just because you say no offense does not mean that no offense is going to be taken. I feel like this was a very smart decision, as it shows that even if someone is wrong in their thinking, it's not so easy to change their minds for the better. Some people just want to be filled with hate, and there's nothing you can do about it rather than learn from them how not to act and treat people. I also really love how Cyborg was the one to really identify with Starfire. As the member of the Titans who's actually black, Cyborg should know what it's like to have people who judge you based on how you look. But once again, they cleverly avoid doing this by having Cy relate to Starfire, not because he's black, but because he's a cyborg. I thought that was really clever, as you really have to be paying attention and thinking about it to realize that Cy is also subject to racism. All in all, this was another great episode that teaches us never to judge someone on things they have no control over. Number 2, I Had a Dream from the Proud Family. Finally, an episode that doesn't just talk about racism, but also the importance of this month as a whole. Penny and her friends aren't all excited about their Black History Month assignments, but when Penny slips and falls on a wet floor, she dreams that it's 1955 and sees how the world used to be before integration. We get to see just how racism affected people back then, which helps us to appreciate what we have now. My favorite part in this episode is when Penny and Zoe shock their teachers and peers by sitting next to each other in class. This leads to a protest at the school, and Penny recites the Martin Luther King Jr. speech, I Have a Dream, for which this episode is named. This episode did a great job teaching us various great lessons, most important of which being don't run inside, especially when it's wet. What? I'm kidding! Jeez, can't you guys take a joke? Number 1. Sons of the Fathers from Static Shock. When I think black superheroes, I think of my favorite, most underrated, and least talked about superhero, Static. And when I think episodes that teach us about racism and how it can hurt people, this episode is always the first in my mind. Static Shock was one of those great 90s shows that wasn't afraid to offend people in order to deliver an important and powerful message. This show is filled to the brim with great episodes about bullying, harassment, domestic abuse, and of course, issues only a person of color could really understand. This episode starts off with Virgil taking his first ever trip to Richie's house, where he learns exactly why his best friend never invited him over. As it turns out, Richie's dad is very racist and isn't happy about his son hanging out with a black kid. When Virgil overhears Richie's dad making racist comments to his wife, Virgil is rightfully hurt and goes home. Richie, upset that his father's racism just drove his best friend off, runs away from home to avoid being around his father. I especially love the scene between Virgil and his dad, as Robert never once says anything against Mr. Foley himself, and you really get the feeling that he feels sorry for Mr. F for the fact that he has all this hatred inside him. In fact, while he and Mr. Foley are out looking for the young runaway, Robert helps him to change his mindset by showing him that many of his prejudices are wrong. But he does this without belittling him or accusing him of being a horrible person, is very patient with him, and I just love this part of this episode. Eventually, they find and save Richie from Ebon and some other Bang Babies, with Static's help, of course. Richie and his dad make up, and Mr. Foley learns that he was wrong. I love everything about this episode, from its message to its relatability, and even how believable Mr. Foley's transition was. It wasn't an instant change, but rather a gradual progression, which leads what could have very easily been an extremely unlikable character to someone with so much depth and personality that you just can't help but be proud. It really is a shame that we don't have more episodes like these in today's media. As Mr. Webb said, those who don't learn from history won't have a future. It's important to teach kids about these things so they can grow up to be better adults. Thank you guys for watching, and if you're interested in seeing more videos from me, you can click the subscribe button down below. Be sure to leave a like and comment if you thought this was good, and I will see you in the next one.
I'm sorry Valior treated you like that. If I'd known, I never would have let it happen.
None of us would.
There is nothing you could have done. There will always be people who say mean words because you are different, and sometimes their minds cannot be changed. But there are many more people who do not judge others based on how they look or where they are from. Those are the people whose words truly matter.